Hello everyone and welcome back to Send It's Weather channel, where today we are looking at the latest from the models for the next few weeks, as well as looking at the ECM, which is showing some very interesting signals, potentially into the end of October and into the first few weeks of November, but all that's to come. Let's start by looking at the current trends. So we're going to start by looking at our good friend the GFS to see what it is showing for the next few weeks, and possibly very tentative signs of a change in the ultra long term. So let's run through it, and if you enjoyed today's video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I do appreciate your continued support. Can we hit 100 likes? Let's get on then. So at the moment, we've got higher pressure centred to the south of the UK. We've got it centred over France, and we're bringing up a mild southwesterly wind. So pretty mild at the moment. Here it's 19 degrees and I'm recording this, so pretty pleasant. That trend sort of continues for higher pressure becomes established over the top of the UK by the weekend and actually begins to move further to our northeastwards, sort of going towards Scandi. We kind of send it to Scandi and we turn things milder. Again, it's pretty mild, it's pretty high and dry, but depending on the exact orientation and position of the high, we could see some overnight frost, but I'm really not expecting too much with this. Higher pressure really gets going over Scandinavia with this run, bringing up a pretty mild south-southeasterly flow, so remaining very mild for the next 10 days there, pretty much. But then into the extended range, the previous run, which I'll show you in a minute, did show some northern blocking, and this one sort of does. You can see higher pressure trying to move to our northwest, up towards Greenland and Iceland, and we're trying to bring down a northeasterly wind, but not quite. It's not really established because we've got plenty of high pressure around the country, keeping things mostly settled. Comparing that to the midnight run, you can see a completely different theme. The higher pressure kind of weakens towards Scandinavia by around day 10, and you can see an area of low pressure going to just to the south of the country, which may turn things quite unsettled in the far south. But you can see higher pressure really getting going out to our west, and this would certainly turn things cooler. Higher pressure out to our west strengthening, and we're beginning to release some quite cool or even cold air from the northeast at the end of this run. So you can see Atlantic Ridge, an extensive northern blocking up towards Greenland, pretty strong there, maybe like an omega block just about. And we've got area of low pressure sitting to our east, winds in from a northeasterly direction, and that will be dragging in some slightly cooler or colder air. -5 line just getting into Scotland. That would be quite a cool end to October there. Now, comparing that to the GM run, which is the midnight run, again, higher pressure to our south, building out to our west and over the top of the country into the end of this week, before returning slightly further to our east, bringing in a southwesterly wind. Doesn't really bring in that southeasterly like the GFS does, but you can see at the weekend high pressure established over the top of the UK and just to our east and northeast, bringing in an easterly wind, slightly southeasterly tilt in the south and the east, so it might be slightly milder. But you can see again maybe very slight signs of higher pressure by day 10 out to our west. Maybe that's going to send the jet stream southwards and bring in a northwesterly flow, but the devil's in the detail on that one. And then we've got the ECM run to see what that's showing. Again, higher pressure to the south, and then that begins to weaken to our east before another ridge builds through the country. Higher pressure getting established over the top of the UK. Doesn't really get sent to Scandi with this one. Kind of sits over the top of the UK, but then begins to retrogress towards Greenland. And we can see that we are very close. It does begin properly retrogresses towards Greenland, but we've got a lot of high pressure around, and we are bringing in a cool northeasterly flow with that, but doesn't quite move properly into the UK. But you can see cooler air masses around the UK. Nothing too major though. It is mostly dry. Most of these are still mostly dry, let's be honest, but maybe slightly cooler. So if we do look at the ensembles and we have a look at, let's have a look at Aviemore today, which is in from far northern Scotland and pretty high up. You can see that for the next few days, well, for the next week, pretty much it's well above average in the north. Things may be cooling down to a longer term, and you can see a few cooler runs or colder runs established, but there's also a few milder runs, such as the GFS 6Z operational run, which a bit biased, so probably won't happen. Look at the snow row. Oh, here we go. Look at all these snow spikes. Bang! There's about 10 snow spikes there. They're starting to show up now. It's that time of year where we start thinking about it, but not quite because it's never happening. But obviously the far hilltops of Scotland with a northerly wind could see some winteriness. Moving on then to the ECM, and we'll get all this centred for you to be able to see. Then you can see that we're going to start by looking at the mean sea level pressure anomalies. So week 1 takes us from the oh, not that one. Wrong week, the 6th to the 13th of October. There you go. That looks better, doesn't it? There you go. Right, mean sea level pressure anomalies. We have higher pressure over and just to the west of the UK, bringing in a slight northwesterly tilt. With the 500 millibar heights, a very similar theme. Temperature anomalies are around or slightly above average in the north. Obviously, cooling down as you head further southwards. And precipitation anomalies are slightly milder than... Well, actually, that's precipitation anomalies are slightly drier than average for many parts of the country. Into week 2, that higher pressure begins to move further north. It's still over the top of the UK, but maybe edging slightly further northwards, which may bring in a slack northeasterly flow, but again, remaining mostly dry. With that 500 millibar heights, again, maybe like a northeasterly flow as higher pressure tries to move further northwards. So, probably milder in the north, but maybe cooler in the south and southeast, for central Britain as well. With that northeasterly flow actually turning much cooler for Western Europe as well. So maybe a hint of a change there. Precipitation will mostly be dry because we're still under the area of high pressure for the most part. Moving on to week 3, the 20th to the 27th of October. Now, I think this is where things start to get a little bit more interesting. So for the end of October, the ECM suggesting higher pressure to our northwest, winds in from a northeasterly direction, and that might actually be a little bit cooler in the south there. Again, 500 millibar heights showing that similar theme, higher pressure to our northwest towards Greenland and Iceland, lower pressure towards Scandi and over Eastern Europe, winds in from a northeasterly direction. Temperature anomalies are cooler than average for all parts of the UK. That's a rare sight these days on these ECM charts. Precipitation, bit of a northwest, north-south split there, drier in the north, maybe slightly nearer normal in the south, and obviously wetter for Eastern Europe into Western Russia. So maybe a hint of a change on the way. Into start November. Well, this looks a little bit better as well. Higher pressure towards Greenland, still remaining to our northwest. Lower pressure over Scandinavia. Winds are in from a northerly direction. Looks quite cold, actually. Very similar with the 500 millibar heights, maybe slightly more unsettled as well, but also cold winds from the north-northwest. Oh, sorry, north-northeast. Temperature anomalies are, because we're getting further out, more uncertain, but it is showing around average temperatures or no signal. Precipitation anomalies, wetter than average, so maybe slightly more unsettled and colder as well. Maybe even wintry in the north. Moving on to week 5, the 3rd to the 10th of November. Again, mid-Atlantic ridge up towards Greenland, lower pressure over Scandinavia, or winds are in from a northerly direction. 500 millibar heights show a very similar theme, maybe not as strong, but still very similar theme. And the temperature anomalies are, again, round average or no signal. And the precipitation anomalies are also wetter than average, so maybe cold and unsettled start to November is shown here. But of course, it could just be rubbish. But then by week 6, you can see higher pressure over Spain and France. That's going to be dragging in a pretty mild southwesterly wind, and low pressure is probably sitting to the north of the UK. 500 millibar heights show higher pressure through the south to the south, winds in from a southwesterly direction. So probably turning much milder by the end, but of course, we're a long way off. Temperature anomalies are around to slightly above average, and precipitation anomalies probably no signal. So maybe there's tentative signs of some colder weather for October, end of October, start of November, but of course it's a long way off, uncertain and unreliable. But the main theme for the next week or so at least, probably the next 10 days, is for it to be quite warm, mild, warm, whatever you want to call it, and pretty dry, very dry actually, besides maybe in the far north and the west of the UK, which may see a few passing showers at times, but on the whole it looks pretty dry, and there's not too much going on at the moment. So yeah, again, if you did enjoy today's video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. I really do appreciate your continued support. We're on the road to 2,300 subscribers. We're about 10 away, so drop us your support. Thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.